On today's episode, we talk about how if you make any comparisons to the Holocaust, you're an anti-Semite. How even if you recognize that the vaccine mandates expand the size, scope, and corruption of a surveillance state, you can still be pro-mandate. How 9/11 was really an attack on heteropatriarchal capitalistic values, and why the world would be better off with no billionaires. This is Cringe Posts. Welcome to this episode of the Cringe Post podcast. My name is Donald.
And I'm Britt.
And we are here to take on those cringy takes you see in your feed and you just can't help but shake your head. Maybe you can't put your finger on quite why they're wrong. We're going to dissect them for you. We're going to take them down. Hope you'll enjoy some laughs with us. And if you are having a good time, please make sure to like and share and subscribe to our podcast on different platforms. Really helps us grow. We've really appreciated the growth that we've had and want to keep seeing that, and we want to be able to share bad takes with the world, starting of course with our own. And I really want to make sure that our co-host today, Britt, his cringe gets spread far and wide, so please share this episode just to all your friends. So we start with Britt's post from March of 2008. So that was you were kiddo then.
15 years old.
Yeah. Right at the well, maybe not the height of teenage angst, but at least in the thick of it.
Pretty close. You're not supposed to drive yet, so like once you're able to drive, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So in March of 2008, Britt writes, well, and of course this is in the old Facebook format, so I'll read it as intended. Britt thinks life is bad. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, this harkens kind of to another of your cringe posts. That's sort of that cry for attention of sorts, right? That like, pay attention to me. I'm feeling bad.
I'm feeling like crying. Yeah, I definitely during my high school years, I was definitely what you would call emo. So I had the like insanely skinny jeans. I had the long hair that went over one eye. I'd wear, the white studded belt and stuff like that. So it's kind of crazy. Like at that time, it was like kind of cool to have such a sad perspective on everything. And so, as elegant as I could put it, I wanted to let people know that I was emo. Life is bad.
Well, if you were
living under my parents' roof, thinking life's
right,
bad.
Yeah, having things provided for you, being able to take advantage of a really good education, and
living in the U.S. of A., baby.
Well, I was gonna say it's if you were a generation younger, I think your post would have suggested like I want to die, haha, because that's sort of the every generation has this phase where they have to complain. It feels like anyway. Maybe we were the inventors, but I'm pretty sure it's just a normal teenage thing. But of course, we get the privilege of being able to post and share it. Yeah, and the generation below us has the even greater privilege of not only posting and sharing, but making them go viral with memes and things like that, which is great. But yeah, I mean, it's funny too. I mean, not to read too much into what I'm sure is a very half thought out post of just, emotional, but it's funny that you're like, thinks life is bad. It's not like you're even like, it's not even like your previous one where you feel like crying. You're like, it's such a grand statement. It's not even that like you're saying like things suck right now. It's like life is bad, man. Like, that's pretty total.
Oh man, it's man. Every time I go back and look through these, because we originally were trying to find like political cringes, right? And I'm kind of like embarrassed that I didn't have many of those because I was just so purely thinking like internally, right? And it's like it's all just this emo, gross, embarrassing stuff. Great for our purposes because I've got an unending well of cringe, but it's kind of traumatizing to go back and look at it.
Right.
You can almost say life is bad that I have to go look at it.
If it helps, it was up. Well, I guess it's uphill from there. I don't know if is it downhill or uphill. I always hear it reversed. But anyway, things only get better.
Yeah, they only get better. Hopefully.
All right, and we will move to our first cringe post of the episode. And this one is from a blue checkmark organization. It is stopantisemitism.org. And before I want to preface this because I'm not an anti-Semite. And I don't think Britt is either. I'm not one of those reactionaries. I find it kind of weird when I'll see people, especially on the populist right a lot of the time, although there are people on the left too, who but mostly the people on the right who simultaneously kind of decry identity politics. They hate the idea of critical race theory, and then they go into these weird conspiracy theories about like Jews controlling everything. And so I don't know. There is anti-Semitic, lines of in our culture that are kind of weird. But regardless of that, so it's like it exists. But here's the post from Antisemitism or StopAntisemitism.org, which I just think is just so cringe. Okay. It shows a picture of Representative Thomas Massie from Kentucky, and he's labeled Anti-Semite of the Week with bold red stamp print, Jew hater, Congressman Thomas Massie. And then the tweet reads, "Why is Representative Thomas Massie our Anti-Semite of the Week? Only Republican to vote against Iron Defense Dome funding. Only Republican to vote against labeling BDS as anti-Semitic. Voted against Holocaust education. Trivializes Holocaust with vile COVID comparisons." And then they provide a link. So, Britt and I were talking a little bit, and I don't even want to delve into the whole, Israel-Palestine conflict in this, but just so that you're aware, when this tweet came out, it was right after Massie was the only Republican to not vote for the Iron Defense Dome Fund. And the Iron Defense Dome is like the missile defense system of Israel. And it is not that Thomas Massie said, you shouldn't have Iron Defense Dome. It's not that he said Israel is the, antagonizing force in the Middle East for these things. No, he simply said, no, Israel needs to pay for their own defense funding that they have budgeted for and they have the funds for. The U.S. should not be spending money overseas on other countries' defense, especially when they can afford it and it's in their budget line to do so. And so it just, and then like the other, the other one, like only Republican to vote against labeling BDS as anti-Semitic. Like, I don't know, like, I don't know anything specifically about that, but I do know that Congress labeling something anti-Semitic, who cares? Who gives a crap what Congress labels? Voted against Holocaust education. Again, I don't know the specifics to what they're referring there, other than I'm okay removing all funding for public federal education regardless. That doesn't mean I'm against education. It means I'm against federal funding for things. So my guess is that it was probably another paid government spending program there. And then, of course, trivializes Holocaust with vile COVID comparisons, where a lot of people were likening, having your vaccine passport is just got to wear the gold star, man, just got to, and those were the kinds of things. I think he made a comparison there. And of course, that makes him a Jew hater, saying that, likening one situation that he thinks is bad to another situation which he thinks was bad makes him a Jew hater for some reason. That labeling him as anti-Semitic for that makes just as much sense as when people called Count Dankula like a Nazi for teaching his girlfriend's dog to do a Nazi salute because he thought it was funny. Like the whole premise of teaching a dog to do a cute small little dog to do an ugly thing is that you recognize the thing it's doing is bad and wrong and ugly. And in the same way, it's like he's comparing the COVID vaccine mandates with the Holocaust because he thinks that both are bad and ugly. Now, you can think it's in poor taste. You can think it's, that's not appropriate. But you can't say it's anti-Semitic unless he was saying that there was like, the Holocaust was like this program I support. That would be anti-Semitic, but not to say that, this bad thing that happened to the Jews is also going to happen here at home. Again, you can think it's maybe misaligned, maybe you think it's, uncalled for, but it's not anti-Semitic.
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me of the Gina Carano deal, like with the Star Wars actor. And when she literally just posted a picture of like, hey, like the way Germany got what they wanted was because they turned their neighbors against each other. And maybe we shouldn't do that. Like it's a pretty vanilla, like let's everyone be happy and love each other sort of thing. Not offensive in any way, shape, or form, and definitely not trivializing anything. If anything, it's saying, hey, like let's like the way these bad things start is by turning neighbors against each other. And man, the backlash against her was just nuts, right? Enough so that Disney literally fired her, right? And so it's kind of weird. I don't really know like which side I guess the StopAntisemitism.org leans, but like whether they're more left or more right. But
my guess is left, I think. But
yeah. It's very. I mean, I guess it's in line with kind of what they talk about, like very identity politics and. I don't know if you saw it. I saw it on Twitter. I don't know if it's real or not, but I actually saw that they were like giving out gold badges in Germany to people that had gotten their COVID vaccine.
Stop.
I'm not joking. I saw that. I don't know. It might have been doctored or it might be used from something else, but someone posted it. I'll have to go find it. I was Googling it just earlier because but I was like, there's a lot of parallels. At least you could say there's some similarities, right? Between like,
that's the whole thing, is it's like a comparison is not an equation. You're not saying this equals that. You're saying this is similar. And by saying something is similar, you're also saying that there are ways in which they differ, right? You're not saying this is the same, you're saying it's similar. So yeah, that's I just think everything about this is so cringe. Like just again, what really did spur this was the first vote against the Iron Dome defense. Like, how is it anti-Semitic to say that, like, I mean, this makes me think of when I was in college and I was on our student senate for funding with like money that you have, like, that students pay in tuition for a sort of an activities budget and like a just general improvement, and the Senate gets to sort of vote and like come up ideas with how to spend that money. And another branch of our school, the ministry association, because it was a small conservative Christian school, they also had their own budget, but they came to the Senate. And they're like, we want you to fund these hazers, which are like fog machines for the chapel, which just made me absolutely die and cringe inside. And I was like one of 2 no votes or something. But it's funny.
There's only 2 no votes on that?
Yeah, they passed. We ended up paying for that. I foolishly, see, I was inexperienced in the ways of politics then, because I actually offered an amendment. They wanted to buy 2 fog machines. And I offered an amendment to make it 1 because I thought 2 was absurd. And I should have offered an amendment to make it 4 so that it didn't pass. Unfortunately, I made it more palatable and people voted for it then. And I was like, oops, that was dumb. But regardless, like, the funny thing is, it's like my argument then, because I wasn't going to have people agree with me that I didn't like the fog machine, because I think people there liked the fog machine. But my argument was like, the campus ministries has its own budget for those kinds of purchases. If they want to buy a fog machine for chapel, they should buy the fog machine for chapel with their money. That didn't make me anti the ministries. I was against that for my own reasons, I guess. But and so I don't know. It's like, Thomas Massey votes against paying for Israel's weapons that they already have a budget for. It's like, well, yeah, because we don't believe in giving foreign aid abroad in general. Not because he hates Jews. That's just, I don't know, hurt looking for a reason to find someone.
Yeah, the last thing I'll have to say on this is, the kind of, I think one of the more common phrases you see said with any sort of Holocaust thing is never forget, right? And so it's like, okay, what's the point of never forgetting? Like, the reason you're supposed to never forget is so that it doesn't happen again, right? It's to take note of all the things that led up to this awful thing that happened, and then say, you know what, maybe we should stand in the way of these things so that, the thing that we're supposed to never forget never happens ever again. And, people fail to forget that it's like, or not fail to forget, fail to remember that we didn't know that the Holocaust happened until we literally arrived at the doorstep of the concentration camps, right? All the signs, all the things that we'd heard about or intelligence that we gathered was not enough for us to know. And so it's like, okay, now that we kind of know how this all happened, we saw, they started segmenting people off. They started classifying them, referring to them more as like animals. They started segmenting them to certain specific places, started labeling them, and then hauling them off to certain concentration camps. Like, okay, all those things, we never forget all these things so that we can never have to show up at a camp and be like, holy crap, there's millions of dead people here that we didn't know about. And so it's just bizarre to me. It's like when people get irritated about people recognizing similarities to the Holocaust, because like that's the whole reason we choose to not forget the Holocaust, is so that it never happens again, so that we can almost point out these things to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, well, and I feel like the last to piggyback off that, if anything, the COVID mandates have become a huge big issue. And again, regardless of, and obviously, I don't think this organization is acting in good faith based on this.
They're not.
But if you were, you might, and even if you agreed sort of that, like, the Holocaust comparison with the COVID mandates or whatever is way out of line. Let's say that that's your perspective. If you wanted to give benefit of the doubt, wouldn't you at least recognize that people like Massey and others who are ringing the alarm bells for these mandates do view it as a very big deal and a very dangerous path to go down? So at the very least, it's like they're not really trivializing it in their mind. They're not saying like this very minor inconvenience is just like the Holocaust. In their mind, this is big and a deal. So it's like you can think that that's ill fit, but that doesn't make it anti-Semitic, and it's not really trivializing it from their perspective. So you might argue it's trivializing it, but to say that that would be done from a perspective of anti-Semitism or intent to trivialize, it just, I don't know. It seems like it's just a slimy smear tactic, which I think you could probably gather from the red stamped Jew hater on his picture.
Yep.
Okie dokie, we'll move on to our next cringe post. And this one is like 90% good take. And the first 10% is so rotten, it makes the cringe posts. This one says, it's a tweet from a non-verified user. So they are anonymous. You are protected for now, my friend. I'm not anti-mandate. I am just against mandating vaccines produced by the most corrupt, power-hungry, money-grubbing regime in history that already used COVID-19 as an excuse to explode the size and scope of the surveillance state and its own powers. Wow, that sounds like a really great reason to be against mandates.
It's like, okay, what in the year 2012, what was the biggest government that fit that description of corrupt, power hungry, and money grubbing? The government of 2012, soon to have a new record broken by the government of 2013, right? It's like, okay, so at what point, dude, is the mandate going to be made by a government that you think is not power hungry, money grubbing, and looking to expand its own powers and surveillance state?
Well, I mean, we've used this meme before. I made a clip of you referencing this meme, but it's the Patrick Star meme with handing his wallet. It's like, the mandate is a vac for vaccines most corrupt, power hungry, money grubbing. It's used to increase the size and scope of the surveillance state. So you're against mandates? No. Oh my gosh!
It's like I'm against mandating vaccines produced by the most. So it's okay. So now do basically anything the government quote unquote produces, right? It's like, like none of it is good. None of it will ever be good, and it will always the next iteration of the government next year and the year after that will always be the most corrupt, power hungry, and money grubbing of any of the governments we've ever seen, because that's the nature of government. It doesn't stay small. It always grows. It seeks to feed itself. It's a parasite.
Think of, like the Patriot Act it was a mandate that came through, and maybe that I can't remember the Patriot Act was that actually voted on? I'm trying to remember. That actually may have been a vote, but regardless, it came from that same sort of mandate. Like, now we have to live by these horrible dystopian flying guidelines and more surveillance kinds of activities that go on, and what seem to be like these temporary measures are now forever with us and have opened the door for the next big mandate and the next big, thing. So it's like, at this point, even if you have faith in a small government structure, that with the right people in there that can make the good mandates, it's like, even if you believe that, I think you are utterly anti-helpful, very not only useless, but you are actively hurting the cause when you say things like, I'm not anti-mandate. I don't care if you're not anti-mandate in theory. In practice, right now, the only kinds of mandates that you're going to have are going to be ones that increase the size and scope of government. So don't give them a caveat. Don't give them grounds to justify, because whenever you give some kind of ground, that's if you just have the right reason or you just have the right end, then that will always be the justification. Well, the Patriot Act, we obviously, the ends were right because we needed to defend ourselves against terrorists. And of course the means were justified because we didn't want a terrorist attack on our soil. Never mind the fact that in practicality, all it did was expand the scope and reach and intrusiveness of the government while producing actively harmful results to our security. Never mind that. It was for the right reasons. And that's every mandate. It's why we joked about in another early, anything named, an acute sounding way is always the opposite of what it's named. The Patriot Act, you're not a patriot unless you support it. The Department of Education, you hate education if you don't support it. Every mandate is going to be that way. And it's just so disheartening to see these people who are so aware, not only just the people who are sort of duped by the vaccine mandates and the lockdowns as being, helpful or necessary, but the people who are even awake to how harmful it was, how good he is on saying it's mandating vaccines posted by the most corrupt, power-hungry, money-grubbing regime, using it at exploding the size and scope of government. You realize all this, and yet you're still not anti-mandate. That is really cringe. That's so disheartening.
We've made fun of him on here before, but Michael Knowles frequently makes this this point. He's like, I'm not anti-mandate. I think there are things that you should mandate for, but he's like, I just think that this is all corrupt. Everything. It's like, dude, like you're so close. It's almost right there. It's like these type of, I don't know if this guy's conservative or not, but I see a lot of conservatives make that point of like, well, I'm not anti-mandate. I think we should be able to legislate, what people do or do not do with their bodies. But it reminds me of like in Lord of the Rings, right? When Boromir's like, no, this is a gift, like we should use it. And Aragorn's like, no, you cannot wield it. Like no one can wield this and it be safe, right? Even if you have the most pure and best of intentions, the power will corrupt you. And inevitably, right, you will lose that power and it will be used against you. Even if you somehow manage to, once you're in office or have the power to actually use it for good, it eventually will be used against you. So it's just better to do away with that power in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, I think we can move on.
Yep.
So our next cringe post comes from a blue check mark, Jen M. Jackson, and the Twitter handle is Jen M. Jackson PhD. So she's smart. So I don't know why I'm even bothering taking her on. But regardless, she tweets, "We have to be more honest about what 9/11 was and what it wasn't. It was an attack on the heteropatriarchal capitalistic systems that America relies upon to wrangle other countries into passivity. It was an attack on the systems many white Americans fight to protect."
Oh, this is just the worst of all worlds.
I mean,
it's like blending the intersectionality garbage with like the neocon warhawk.
Yeah.
Like,
I know. Well, it's like you tie American imperialism and foreign meddling to capitalism, and you link the two, and then you take all of the negatives from colonial imperialistic, nation building and foreign meddling, and then you just call it capitalism. And that is a very common academic thing to do. I remember I was listening to an audiobook of Noam Chomsky's, and I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it was the one. Media is in the title, and he has like 40 books. So forgive me for not recalling the title. But I thought I'd listen to it because I was like, well, on media stuff, we'll probably agree, because there's some things with Noam Chomsky I'd agree. And I got so mad. I'd be in traffic listening to it, and I'd be like yelling in my car, like, "You idiot! You're conflating capitalism and imperialism, and they're not necessarily like you can use imperialism with capitalistic ends. That's just in the same way that you could argue that you can use violence to achieve democratic socialism, and you would protest or whatever. The only difference is that capitalism can exist without imperialism. Eventually, democratic socialism relies on violence to achieve its means." But
that's good.
But it just made me so mad, because it was like, yes, capitalism can be used to justify doing bad things. That doesn't mean capitalism itself is bad. It means the person doing the bad things is using it as a scapegoat for your actions. In the same way that if I go and I murder my neighbor in order to steal their TV and bring it to my wife, I can say, no, I did this for my wife. You're not going to blame my wife because I got her the gift. You'd blame me for murdering my neighbor. And so it's like, yeah, like, invading or causing a coup in South America so that you can have access to their resources. That's this evil private-public partnership between the government and some private corporation that wants those minerals. Yes, that's evil, and that's not capitalism. That's corruption from government. That's imperialism. So in that same way, this person's like, 9/11 was an attack on the heteropatriarchal capitalistic system. That's just a mouthful right there. And the more syllables and words you fit like that are not necessary, the more you can see through the transparency of how vapid this tweet actually is. But excuse me. It was an attack on the heteropatriarchal capitalistic systems that America relies upon to wrangle other countries into passivity. So she's almost hitting the right thing. It's like it was an attack on our imperialism. It was an attack on our meddling. It was not an attack on capitalism, though. Those are not the same thing.
And not an attack. Like, this person, this is what drives me nuts. Is like, you know that show, The Handmaid's Tale? And people are like, ooh, like under Trump's America, The Handmaid's Tale is coming. These people literally think that we've got like a Handmaid's Tale like society. That's why they say heteropatriarchal. And it's like, okay, let's say it's just they kind of like conflate. It's almost like the equivalent of the like they hate us for our freedom like line from the neocons, but it's the opposite end of that. It's like they hate us because we're heteropatriarchal. It's like I wonder what religion out there is dominated by men and forces women to do, basically become property, and they're forced to cover up and all these other things. I wonder which religion that is. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, whatever it is, 30% of Muslims believe that you should have some sort of physical punishment for trying to leave their religion, right? So that it's such a weird take to have to say that. It's like it's because they just want to talk about it. They want to fit in that word salad of this jargon and intersectional jargon, and that's just garbage. And so like it's the opposite of they hate us for freedom, but it's just as bad, right? It's like it's bizarre.
Well, what's crazy when the way that the troops actually found Saddam Hussein when they were trying to track him down, or excuse me, Osama bin Laden, was he had a "In this house we believe that love is love" sign outside of his bunker. And that's how, because he was such a supporter of dismantling the heteropatriarchal capitalistic systems, he was such a bleeding heart progressive, and that's why they were attacking America.
Yeah. He just crossed out the one about homosexuality and LGBTQ because that doesn't align, right? You couldn't get away with that over there.
I was gonna say it's a little modified. Allah is love and things like that, but. Anyway,
in this house we believe, this house we believe that if you're LGBTQ, we're gonna throw you off a building. Yeah, exactly. That's the only one that's different. It's that whatever capitalistic company wanted to sell those signs over there knew they had to modify it just a little bit.
Right. Well, and heaven knows that it couldn't be a white American selling over there, because again he just was so opposed to capitalism, and he was attacking on the race, not on the meddling or anything like that. So good old Saddam and bin Laden, those progressive heroes, they're the Martin Luther King Jr.'s of their region. Okay, so for the last cringe posts, we actually have two. And I wanted to tie them together, not because they're related necessarily, but because they're very thematically similar. And this first one came from like just about 2 weeks ago from a Washington State U.S. representative. So us being represented on the federal level, so proud for this one. So we'll read this one first, and then I'll move to and explain the second one. The first one is from Pramila, I believe it's Jayapal. I've only read this, so I've not actually heard on it spoken, but she's a U.S. representative from Washington State, and she tweets, "The U.S. has nearly 1/3 of the world's billionaires. Meanwhile, our poverty rate is the 4th highest in the world. Tax the rich."
Oh, and then my gosh.
The second post, which we'll talk about both, but I'll just read them out both now. This one actually comes to me from my friend Nick, so give him a shout out here. And this one's technically not a post. I just could see it being a post. It was actually from his class. So he's in grad school, and this was an interaction that actually happened in his class. And I just kind of made it into this nice little meme because I thought I'll just create a cringe post. See, I'm coming to you transparent. When we fake the memes, I tell you, this is a fake meme, but it's representative of an actual interaction that happened in this class. So he's in this class, and the economics professor asked the class what our one wish from a genie lamp would be. And the first response was a high-paying job. My response, or the person who answered, not my friend, of course, but my response, a world with no billionaires, so that their money could be given to social causes. and so the common theme here, of course, being that billionaires are the root of all evil, which I did not realize. But the funny thing is that it's like, At least with the representative, she's just saying tax the rich. In the response from the grad student, he's like, I want a world with no billionaires. He doesn't want a world where billionaires like are, contributing, or that where like a society in which these things are more funded. He wants to make sure that there are no billionaires. Like the byproduct of the social causes has to come with no billionaires. It's not enough for those social causes to be fixed. It's not enough to end poverty or to raise the standard of living or whatever end cause. You have to get rid of the billionaires. That's what strikes me with that kind of response. It's very it's more it betrays the kind of personality behind the wish. It's not some sort of bleeding heart person just like, I just want to end poverty. I want to end world hunger. No. This person they just think they're so smart. They think they're so, we need to get rid of the billionaires. That's your priority, not the social causes that you're purporting to fund here.
That genie reminds me of, like, if someone's going to make that wish, it's one of those genies that tries to get you to make a wish that actually makes you the opposite, like it makes you miserable. It's like, man, like the reality that this person wants to bring about is not possible without billionaires existing.
Exactly.
The one that gets me, man, do you know Pramila, do you know which district she represents?
I don't, not off the top of my head.
This is embarrassing, man. Like, it's like just think about it for a minute. It's like, okay, there's like 180 plus countries in the world. And like I can think of, several sub-Saharan ones, let's think about Somalia or Nigeria or, it's like, okay, I wonder, do you think those have a higher or lower poverty rate than, the United States? And it's like, okay, so I had to Google it, right? Because I was like, man, maybe I'm wrong. For someone to make this bold of a claim, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's something that's not telling me. Because obviously, I'd way rather be poor in the United States than basically anywhere else in the world. And she just is flat out wrong, right? The United States is like 108th or something like that on the list. It's not fourth. It's like the fourth in like the list of like some like slim down list. I can't remember, some like group of economic countries.
Right.
But the thing is like this is measured by the poverty line is different in each country, right? It's based off of a certain amount. So in the United States, the poverty line, if you make less than $13,000 as an individual, then you're considered below the poverty line. $13,000 in the United States buys you a whole lot more living capability than the poverty line wages in Somalia, right? If you wanted to say, hey, you could go live below the poverty line in Somalia, or you could live below the poverty line in the United States, a million times out of a million, people will choose to live below the poverty line in the United States because obviously the standard of living is much better.
It's why, immigrants come to the U.S. who were doctors in their country, and then they come and they work their way up to being sort of like a Walmart general store manager. And it's like, you were a doctor in your country, but it's still preferable to live a middle income life here than a top end life in other countries, oftentimes. And that's just because our standard of living is so much higher. And for the record, she represents, surprise, surprise, a lot of Seattle, Edmonds, shoreline, that
Nice.
sort of west side of Seattle and up and down there. So, yeah, shocker.
That's embarrassing, dude. I like, how could you? If you're gonna tweet something like that, you better like actually read up on it at least. Just Google it, like it's just it's wild that she would do that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like claiming that rape didn't exist before white imperialism, which we hit on our last episode. It's one of these things where, and I don't know if that's the case for there. You can maybe have some contextual case where that is technically true in a very slim, like, specific area case study, or where it's technically on record as those words have been said, but you're missing all the context around it. And so that's what this strikes me as. It's like, on a certain index, when accounting for certain factors and not adjusting for the poverty relative to each country, it measures forth on the standard of life index of these selected countries with their respective poverty line measure or whatever. And it's like, goodness, and then of course her solution is that 1/3 of the billionaires live in the US, which must mean that they're causing the wealth inequality, and that's why we need to tax them too. And it's like, goodness, have you considered that maybe the billionaires are why our standard of living is so much higher, and so that we have such a high poverty rate compared to other countries where the poverty rate, the threshold to be in a poverty rate is much much lower to cross. You have to be making a lot more money to be considered not in poverty than you would elsewhere. And maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe the 1/3 of the world's billionaires being here has helped generate that industry and generate that revenue. It's not novel, but it's just like John Mackey or anyone else will say. It's not, the wealth creation is not a fixed pie. When you're providing services and you're creating goods and you're putting in effort and work, you're producing more than you put in, and you create value, and all the rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, there's this weird, like, on the left, and there's a little bit on the right too, like in the protectionist sections, like that the world is like getting actively worse and worse and worse, and all this wealth inequality, and people are, we're going to live in, some sort of dystopian awful thing. Like, I remember seeing a picture someone posted of like an Amazon distribution center that was built in I think in Tijuana or one of those more poor Mexican towns. And they were like, this is such a dystopian image. I'm like, dude, I bet the people there are thrilled that they've got like a big, warehouse that's going to employ a bunch of them to work and, generate wealth. And I pull up the statistic on my phone. In 1990, the world population was 5.3 billion, and there were 1.9 billion people in extreme poverty. So almost about a third, right? A little over a third, actually, of people lived in extreme poverty. This is not poverty. This is extreme, meaning if they don't get more resources, they will likely be gone, in the next number of months. Fast forward to today, in 2021, world population is 7.6 billion, and people in extreme poverty is 0.7 billion, just a little bit over 500 million people. So in the same, in a 30-year time span where we have literally, grown the world's population by 25%, we have, basically cut the amount of people in extreme poverty by, 2/3. Like, that's fantastic. And the question then becomes, why is that, right? It's because of all this innovation. It's because of all of this ingenuity. It's because of all these new ways for people to get more resources, quicker and less expensively. And, how that happens is from, entrepreneurs, people that eventually do become billionaires because they provided such a good service. Like, you think about, like, and we've talked about this hundreds of times on this podcast at this point, I feel, but like, you talk about someone like Bill Gates, right? It's like, it's incalculable how much value that guy has brought to the world in terms of what his software has done. Not only just directly from his company and employing people, but also from the amount of people that other companies are able to employ because they exist because they're built on Microsoft products, right? So let's just, just throwing it out there, I'm sure this is a low number, but let's just say over the past, 40, 50 years of Microsoft being in existence, he's generated somewhere like $10 trillion. I think that's probably on the low end in terms of value. What percentage of him making that happen, because Microsoft wouldn't have happened without him, do you think he is owed? It's like, okay, like, even if you said 1%, right, that's about how much wealth he has, right, he's generated. So it's like, it's not like he came about his wealth from just a pure, like, ratio standpoint unethically. That gets pretty much in proportion to what the amount of value you produced. And I think about Elon Musk's tweet, right, which is, you were paid directly in proportion to the value and the complexity of the problems that you solve. And I think that's a great way to look at it. If you don't have people solving those problems, if they're not incentivized to solve those problems, because 9 out of 10 businesses go out of business within the first 10 years of them existing, no one's going to take the risk, right? You have to have some sort of incentive and profit motive for those businesses to exist, and that's the only way the world gets better. So that kind of hits on the second meme, which is, yeah, you won't have any money. There won't be, you'll have the same amount of bones for everyone to gnaw on because everything will be equal, but there's not going to be anything of value, if there's no billionaires.
And obviously not every billionaire is made equally, but like, think about if these people actually considered that so many, if not most, of the billionaires that are and exist, even if not actively, are passively making people's lives better with the resources they have available to borrow. Think about it in this way. Like, a billionaire not existing does not mean that their wealth independent of them exists and gets spread around evenly. It means that someone has accrued value and has the ability and foresight to hold on to that value and invest and grow that value more and more. So, it's kind of like the whole, like the truism about how people who win the lottery, who are poor and they inherit a bunch of money, and like 5 years later end up just back where they were broke because they don't know how to manage the money. And it's kind of like, if you're not actively generating value, maintaining that value, investing the value, making it grow, it gets used up and goes away. So the idea that you get rid of billionaires and all their money goes to social causes, as that meme, wants to do, it's like, okay, great. It's like, let's dissolve all of the billionaires' wealth right now and take away everything they have from them, donate to these social causes. Great. They'll be on they'll have a great movement for 2 years. And then guess what? Those billionaires that were donating every year and sustaining these things and helping other sectors innovate and grow so that those millionaires could donate, and so that those people who aren't millionaires, who are making under that, donate. All of these chain reactions, they don't exist now. They don't. You haven't created a renewable source of revenue, and you haven't created a renewable source of wealth to help these social causes that you want to help, I guess. But again, that's not the issue here. They don't. This person's wish isn't for there to help out these social causes. It's not to eliminate the problems the social causes have. It's that the billionaires go away because it's an ideological position that flies in the face of economic realities, not one that is open to learning and trying to solve problems in the most efficient manner possible. The people who want to solve problems efficiently are capitalists.
Yep. It makes me think of, right now they're having all the different discussions about the debt ceiling, and they want to pass the $3.5 trillion budget and all this stuff. And I saw this meme, and maybe we'll have to go into it later episode, but someone's like, well, how do we pay for $3.5 trillion? Simple. We tax the corporations. And I was like, okay, you don't realize how much $3.5 trillion is. And so I went to the Fortune 1000, not the Fortune 500, the Fortune 1000. Mm-hmm. And it's basically like if you took almost all of the Fortune 1000 companies' profits, like all of them, and you took all their profits for the year of 2020 and you took them away from them and you gave it to this program, you would be able to fund 1/3 of it, right? So that's just how nuts it is, and that's how much money $3.5 trillion is. Obviously, there's revenue and all the different taxes and tax loopholes and charity and stuff that they give to avoid it. But still, that's a staggering thought, is like, even if you took all the money that was profitably made by all of the 1,000 biggest businesses in the United States, you still couldn't pay for some of these programs, right? And that's why they're trying to mint a $1 trillion coin right now.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact. It might have been Bob Murphy who was tweeting it, but I saw this. It was someone. Maybe it wasn't Bob Murphy. I don't remember. But someone made this great tweet about how people don't have a frame of reference for how large the trillion is. That it's like, oh, just tax the corporations, and you demonstrated that's really not feasible. And it's like, when you realize how much a trillion is, and their illustration was something along the lines of, if you went back 1 trillion seconds, you would be in the early civilizations of Earth's existence. 1 trillion seconds was way before America's founding, way before, and it's like that's 1 trillion seconds, So it's like, putting these numbers into perspective for people is tantamount, because not only do they need perspective on how big 1 trillion is, they also need perspective on how big the margins of corporations are. A lot of people love to put in comparison of what the average worker makes to their CEO and whatnot. But what they don't love to do is the average company's turnover from start, their starting years to building, and then how much profit and how much help and how much value they've been able to provide for those people. It's like, they're making that profit because they're successful, because people are saying, I would rather give them this money and get that service in return. And you've created something for them, and both people are happy. And if a billionaire is made from that, well, then great, because that means they're doing their job well, most cases. And of course, this doesn't, we're not trying to justify every billionaire who's ever existed. There are some people who get there through fraud and cheat, and that's gross. That's not how capitalism should work. But a lot of those people get there from fraud and cheating through government means and through government permission as well. So the idea that, you can have this government entity and oversight and fix those problems is a false choice, because unfortunately we live in a reality of a fallen world where bad people will do bad things sometimes. And that means that sometimes not all the billionaires are properly made, but I'd rather it be the case that you can still be successful and you can still be a billionaire by helping people, and that's the easiest, best path to getting there, than to try to eliminate that and try to somehow have the same value generated from an entity that's not only inept, but prone to corruption and is only good at corruption, which is the government.
Totally agree with you. I don't think I've got any more on this one.
Nope, I think we're good for that, for this episode. So thank you again for listening to the show, and we hope that you will like and share with your friends. Follow our socials at Cringe Posts Pod, as well as our website at cringeposts.com, and be sure to check in for our next episode.
Catch you later.